I often have clients and prospective clients ask me, what are good download numbers? That's what we're going to talk about on this episode of Podcastification. My name is Kerry Green, and I am the Client Happiness Guy at PodcastFastTrack.com, and this is Podcastification. This show is all about podcasting. How to do it, how not to do it, best practices, interesting news items that have to do with the realm of podcasting, and who knows what else. And I'm trying to do it all with a little bit of fun and some information to help you get a show going, keep yours going, or make it better. And if you like what's going on here on the show, I would appreciate it, so appreciate it, if you could leave a rating or review on iTunes. You can find out how to do that at podcastfasttrack.com/review. That's enough of that kind of stuff. Let's get you podcastificated right away. Stats. Download numbers. Man, every podcaster wants big numbers, right? We want to know that lots of people are appreciating and learning from the content that we're sharing. I mean, we hear a story like happened just a few weeks ago where a podcaster has incredible downloads. And what I'm referring to is Dan Carlin. He's got a podcast called Hardcore History, and he got 1 million downloads in 24 hours.
Incredible.
And while that would be great for your podcast, or mine for that matter of fact, I wouldn't turn them away, there's some facts we need to think through about this in order to truly understand what those big numbers mean. Dan Carlin is an exception, not the rule. I mean, first of all, he's podcasting about a general topic, history. And by general, I mean it's not super specific, like wedding photography, or like happy Black women entrepreneurs. Yes, that is a real podcast one of my clients does. Another thing about Dan's show is he's been at it a long time. His first episode published July of 2006. I mean, think about it. At the time of me recording this episode, that's over 10 years ago. Whoa! As a result, he's built a following over all of that time. It's that snowball effect that it gains momentum and picks up speed as it's going, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And Dan's also got some money invested in his production and his promotion. Seriously, you should check out his webpage and look at those beautiful graphics or listen to an episode to see the kind of production value he brings to his shows. And something else that's different about Dan's podcast is that his latest episode, the one that got the 1 million downloads within 24 hours, was almost 6 hours long. Dan Carlin and Hardcore History are clearly an exception, not the rule. Every other podcast that you hear that has crazy download numbers also has many of those same kinds of characteristics, especially the time-based ones. They've either been podcasting for a very long time, or they've built up a following through some sort of promotional or relational connections that have helped them get the ball rolling faster. That means you should never compare yourself to another podcaster because there are just so many variables about what they are doing and what you are doing that are different. Your situation just simply isn't the same. So what really is a good number of downloads to expect from your normal niche-specific podcast? I reached out to a colleague of mine over at Libsyn for the answer, Rob Walsh. By the way, you can hear Rob on my show on episode 43, which you can find at podcastfasttrack.com/43. And I asked Rob how many downloads are actually a good number of downloads. And Rob, as he's so prone to do, went to the stats. And he says the median downloads out of all the podcasts that exist are 200 downloads per episode. Now, what is a median value? Well, if you were to put all the download numbers for all the podcasts out there in a list from least to highest, the median is the number in the very middle of the list. the one that's dead center between the high and the low. Using a median like this is a good measure of the average value when the numbers you're using include exceptionally high or low values, which is definitely the case with podcast statistics. Using a median enables us to give less weight to the ones that are high and the ones that are low, which means we're seeing more clearly what's truly normal. So Rob says that the median is 200 downloads per episode. So think about that for your podcast. If you're getting 200 downloads per episode, you're on par with most of the podcasts out there. And if you're getting more than 200, hey, you're above average. I know. Facebook and other social media platforms have addicted us to knowing how many people are liking or tweeting or listening to or reading our stuff. I mean, for that reason, those kind of numbers are rightly referred to as vanity metrics because they make us feel good more than anything else. Download stats can become the same sort of self-encouragement, and that's not always a bad thing. But here's something I learned years ago when I was pastoring local churches. And it had to do with the attendance numbers. I mean, that's what it was for me back then. Those numbers of people attending the church services, I learned, have to represent real people to me. In my mind, I've got to think of those numbers and translate it into real people. I had to get outside the numbers for the sake of the numbers and connect the dots to what really matters. People who are potentially being impacted by what we were doing in the church. So let's transfer that to downloads, and you can take that same approach. And I think you should take that same approach. Every number is not about a number. It's about a person. That's a person who's coming to you for advice, for your lessons learned, for help with the topics or areas of expertise that you address, for your particular approach to the subject. So how does that impact the significance of your download numbers? Will you tell me? How often do you get the opportunity to speak to 200-ish people for a focused period of time? How often do you get the opportunity to speak directly into their earbuds so they're somewhat undistracted while they're listening to you? How often do you get to speak to them about a subject that you are passionate about? And how often do you get to do that about a subject they have self-selected you to speak to them about? Most people never get that opportunity. And you get to do it every single episode of your podcast. So I want to ask you, given the fact that the average podcast only gets 200 downloads an episode, and given the fact that most people never get that opportunity, shouldn't we be thinking of it in a different way? Shouldn't we be careful we're not thinking of only 200 downloads and thinking in terms of, wow, 200 downloads? So how do you think about your download numbers now? Hello? Hey, I want to thank you for listening to Podcastification. Would you do me one very simple favor? Whatever device you're listening to the show on right now, would you swipe left, right, up, down, whatever you have to do to find the sharing functions on this episode, and think in your mind of one or two specific people who you know could benefit from the things that I'm sharing on Podcastification, and share this episode with them through text or email, and include a personal note, just telling them why you think they would like the show. Hey, I appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Now go out and make it a podcastificating day. This show is brought to you by Podcast Fast Track, where my team provides professional podcasting services without the time suck. Full production, editing, and show notes, all in one monthly subscription package. You can find out more at podcastfasttrack.com. Now go out and make it a podcastificating day. Audio editing and show notes by podcastfasttrack.com. Get 15% off your first month by mentioning this show.